Warm greetings from the American Council on Education. I'm Kara Godwin, Director of Internationalization at ACE.
And I'm Chris Glass. I'm an associate professor at Old Dominion University.
Along with ACE Assistant Vice President Robin Helms, we've been collaborating the past few years to develop a new foundation for our work with international students. Today, we'd like to introduce you to a new ACE monograph. It's called Toward Greater Inclusion and Success, a New Compact for International Students. In the last decade, we've seen unprecedented growth in practice experience and research about international students, including the flourishing peer-reviewed Journal of International Students, for which Chris is editor-in-chief. Our goal in this discussion is to focus on what is unique about ACE's new compact and its most critical aims. I'll provide a brief introduction and then we'll turn to Chris with some targeted questions to learn more about the new compact. The compact was initiated actually by an ACE graduate research assistant who herself was an international student, and she was very struck by some of our research findings. In 2016, data from ACE's ongoing longitudinal study mapping internationalization on US campuses indicated that US institutions were not doing as well as they should supporting international students. But this was at the same time that more and more resources were devoted to recruiting and enrolling them. This, along with the challenges and the stark inequalities that the pandemic caused for internationally mobile students worldwide, brought to the fore a critical need to define a new way forward for higher education's relationship with international students. Our work in this compact is underpinned by ACE's Model for Comprehensive Internationalization, which you can read more about on our website. Influenced by the UN Sustainable Development Goals, as well as knowledge that our current climate calls for fresh direction in international education. In December, we published a renewed model for comprehensive internationalization. Now, it's not very different from the old model, except that we call out explicitly some really important aspects of what is needed for internationalization going forward, looking into the next decade. It emphasizes that institution internationalization is not the work of one office, and that a shift is needed from focusing on global mobility really to global mindset. And we've added a new lens, that's the ring that you see around the outside of the model, focusing on especially diversity, equity, and inclusion, and centering equity as a huge influence on both the research that we've done here in this compact and the practices that we're putting forth, and on our work transforming institutions to be more internationalized and globally engaged. And with that, we've really shifted our thinking to talking about the institution and the learning culture that's being created there, where we talk about all members of the institution, not just students, but students, faculty, and staff as learners, in order for them to advance personally and professionally in their thinking and understanding of who they are and how they relate to our work with equity. In addition to that, we're having more focus on data-informed decision-making, and certainly the need for agility and transformation within institutions, evidenced by what a lot of institutions have experienced in higher ed generally during the pandemic. So again, you can learn more on our website about that, but I want to call our attention now back to the monograph. It's very broad reaching. It talks about the international student life cycle. So we're really talking about developing relationships with students from the time that they are considering studying abroad, during their time at the institution, and then as alumni after they leave the institution. It also covers both undergraduate and graduate students and all types of colleges and universities within the US. And while this is written from a relatively US vantage based on the policies and higher education practices that we discuss, we hope that the key concepts related to valuing and nurturing international students will resonate globally. Finally, it's a meta-analysis. It pulls together practice in the field along with a myriad of research resources and critical questions for thinking about going forward. But I would really love to turn this conversation over to Chris now and pose a few questions that help guide us through thinking about what's in the new compact. Chris, I really feel like this compact is a call to action for higher education and our community, one that asks our institutions, policymakers, researchers, and professionals to step forward and shape a different future for our relationship with international students. What do you feel are the most critical components of the compact's foundation, and why are they essential to our work going forward?
Yeah, thanks, Kara. I think that tenants are really the bedrock of the model. The way I see it, at least, we're facing a fundamentally new context. And it's not just because of the pandemic, it's because of some long-term megatrends that have built up over a long period of time. From issues of sustainability in the planet and the climate crisis that you referred to earlier, but the increasing role of network technology in the future of student mobility, the rapid expansion of access and massification of higher education systems around the world. These are long-term trends that really provide an opportunity for higher education institutions to step out in front and lead. And I think the same trends that are heightening the risks in the short term are also generating opportunities that are going to produce better outcomes for international students in the long term. So I think proactive institutions and the bedrock of this model are going to be leading internationalization by linking internationalization to sustainable development, centering culture on the student experience, using network technology to link sites across the globe, focusing a lot more on affordability than we have in the past, and thinking a lot more intentionally about issues related to equity and social justice. So let's take sustainability. It's the recognition that we've been on an unsustainable path that has assumed that there is limitless growth in cross-border enrollment, and there's ecological limits to our planet. And so there's a lot more of a need to focus on how research and education can address the sustainable development goals. In terms of being culturally responsive, it's recognizing that too often when we've asked international students to adapt to our context, what we often really are asking them to do is to adopt US-centric approaches to thinking and relating, as opposed to transforming our institutions' culturing and centering culture on the student experience, where diversity is something that drives innovation and fosters academic excellence. Network technology focuses on that the disruptions in technology that we're seeing in global communications and information technology are disruptions, but they're also massive new opportunities to reimagine international education and exchange with more sustainable approaches. And finally, humanism reframes the idea that too often we've thought about international enrollment as a global race for talent, with a focus on competition and commercialization that has overshadowed the academic mission of higher education. And new generations of international students are going to come from far more diverse socioeconomic backgrounds. They could be refugees, asylum seekers, and undocumented students among students from more varied socioeconomic contexts. This finally focuses on equity, which recognizes that affordability is really becoming one of the most significant barriers for US higher education and an opportunity for access institutions like community colleges and public regional universities to meet the global demand for higher education.
Thanks so much, Chris. I totally agree with the key points that you've pulled out there. I think another element of our work has really been reckoning with the ideas of higher education as not just an individual good, but as a social good, and the way in which our relationship with international students fits into the broader concept of higher education's role in society. Building on the foundational tenets you just described, can you talk a bit more about how our vision for student, institution, and societal outcomes guide our efforts to nurture international students' inclusion and success?
Yeah, the vision part is another really important part of the monograph. It is an attempt to better articulate the tremendous benefits that can happen from international exchange. And those benefits, not just for individuals and the institutions that are part of that, but what it means for regional economies, what it means for multiple countries, what it means for the world. So higher education is a social good where these international connections that are created through international exchange are creating global public goods. And it's about bringing all of the benefits to the forefront when we talk about the vision for international education, the market and the non-market, the short term and the long term, the benefits for individuals and the benefits for society, the local benefits, but also the global benefits, and the tremendous scale of these benefits for the future of our world. So the benefits that come from scientific collaboration. We need scientific collaboration to address the global crises, whether that be the pandemic or issues related to climate change. And 3 in 4 global STEM graduates will be graduating from universities in other countries, which means international exchange is an important part of preparing US students to work with scientists worldwide to address these cross-border issues. The benefits of cultural diplomacy really talk about the importance of the new community-to-community connections that are created through international exchange, and that international students bring cultural vibrancy to local communities. The benefits of alumni connections It's really surprising that only 1 in 3 international students have alumni career support, and most universities and colleges don't track international alumni after graduation. And the idea is to see that success is really staying better connected with our international alumni for the future of our institutions. The benefits of liberal learning, which is something that is distinctly US. It's perfectly attuned to this moment. Liberal learning focuses on engaging in multidisciplinary perspectives, interdisciplinary curriculum, a focus on critical thinking, engagement with otherness, and cultural understanding that really meets the moment that we're in. And finally, the benefits of economic development. College educated immigrants have a multiplier effect on the US economy after they graduate if they stay in the United States. And international students too often and too many times has been viewed as a jobs threat. But really they make our economy stronger, and particularly they're important in states that are facing shortages of workers due to population declines in an aging workforce.
Thanks, Chris. I think one of the ways that this compact is different from the familiar discourse about international students is that it emphasizes ways that our institutional communities and their domestic members need to change in order to transform into environments that not only welcome international students, but that engender their sense of belonging and holistic success. This is a contrast to our traditional framing in which we expect international students to adapt, and more critical in my mind, to conform to our system's norms. Can you talk about what we mean by inclusion and success?
Yeah, I've written a lot about international student belonging, and really the heart of the report focused on the question, what does it mean to be included at an institution? Universities aren't just destinations, and they're gateways to future opportunities. Belonging is more than just planting roots at a university. It is colleges and universities creating routes to new opportunities for international students. And proactive institutions are going to be creating intentional pathways that provide international students a full access pass to everything that's happening on campus life and full access to all the opportunities that are available after graduation. So inclusion in the higher education context recognizes that a tertiary education is not just about acquiring knowledge and information, but also building networks. In other words, the focus of inclusion says it's important about who international students meet, because when you're on campus, you meet people you wouldn't otherwise meet on your own. They could be peers from across the globe, to CEOs, to community leaders, to world-renowned professors. So who you know, who you meet, what groups you belong to, that matters for inclusion. How strong are those connections? How diverse a set are those relationships? That matters for inclusion. So the most important connections aren't just to individuals. Too often we talk about international students having to form new relationships or building their own networks. These are really about connections to groups and communities that we can provide access to for international students. International students need access to academic and research networks of faculty. They need access to the diasporic networks in local communities. They need access to city and community networks that are built through community engagement. And they need access to alumni and employer networks that are created through proactive career services. So inclusion requires this kind of intentionality, sequence experiences, career planning, engaged learning, relationships with support staff, faculty, peers, and a campus climate that centers culture on the student experience, where culture is both relevant and responsive to the international students' presence on campus.
Yeah, thanks, Chris, so much. That brings us really to the last segment of our model and the compact for international students. And there are a lot of directions that we could have taken this last segment in terms of implementing the foundation, the vision, and the framework that we've just discussed. Our field and the popular discourse around international students in higher education has traditionally focused on recruitment and enrollment planning. It's really focused on the numbers. So can you talk a bit, Chris, about why we ended with the launch and what it is that the compact is trying to emphasize with that?
Yeah, so the launch typically comes first. When we think about what is in the process of the life cycle of the international student, the launch is where you're focusing on recruitment. But the reason we ended with the section on the launch rather than begin with it is because the launch is really going to be based on those first 3 elements of the report: the tenets, the vision, the outcome, and the inclusion part of the story that we're trying to tell in the report. And it's also driven by a core ethic. And that ethic is, when we talk about recruitment, really recruitment is just the first step in building a lifelong relationship. And the report emphasizes time and time again the importance of that lifelong relationship. So it's important to think of our university brand not as an image we're trying to project, but as a promise or a set of promises we're trying to make to international students. What promises are we making to new generations of international students, and how faithfully are our institutions keeping those promises? How consistently do we deliver on those promises from the first point of contact to every interaction to the years post-graduation? Because the report is based on an understanding that new generations of international students are likely not going to look like the ones in the past. I like to think of it in terms of seeing new generations in 4D, in terms of the new destinations that they're looking at, the new demographics and socioeconomic characteristics of these students, the new drivers and things that motivate them to select institutions and to choose to study abroad, and new forms of delivery. And so what promises are our institutions making in regards to the safety, the program quality, the affordability, our reputations, and the employment opportunities? How effectively we keep those promises really become an important part of an institutional identity and the promises we make to international students. If we think about the promise of safety, we know right now safety concerns are among the top 5 considerations for international students. It used to not be that way. In fact, concerns about safety rose from being concerns of just about 12% of incoming students in 2016 to almost half of students that were surveyed in 2019. Students are also looking for program quality. We often think about institutional rankings and the world rankings, but data would suggest that students often look at the subject ranking or the program quality, whether or not a program is in a new and innovative major or field in selecting their institution. And so what promises we're making about the program quality that they'll experience when they come to our campus. The promise of affordability. New generations of international students are going to be more middle class and employment focused, and the cost of attendance is going to be much more on the forefront of their mind. If we just take the example of students from India, the cost of attendance has risen 30% just in about 5 years for them. It's not always a top consideration for all students, but it's definitely going to be a heavier consideration. And we're going to need to rethink how we think about types of funding, whether they be work study programs, assistantships, scholarships, or other types of financial support. Then there's also the promise of reputation. Reputation, the good part is that the US higher education system has a strong reputation. This remains a key advantage despite complicated visa processes for the country. And then finally, promise of employment, career and advising, internship opportunities that prepare students for employment in their international students' home countries or other countries or in the United States are going to be important in terms of recruitment.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chris. We've been working on this monograph for a long time, and we've seen a lot of really important changes happening in our country and certainly globally through the pandemic, and a lot more of the work we've been doing on other crises as well. And every time I pick up the compact and I look at the pieces of it that we've just described, I feel like there's a lot of work to do, but I also feel a lot of hope. And we're really excited to be working with all of you at the ACE Collaborative today. We're looking forward to our discussion, and we're looking forward to hearing from you and adding to this dialogue going forward. Thank you so much for being with us today, and we look forward to continue talking.